If you're looking for visionary conversations that push the boundaries of everything you thought you knew, welcome to Conversations Beyond the Cutting Edge, where every month, veteran broadcaster, author, and media consultant Sandie Sedgbeer invites two leading authorities from distinctly different fields to engage in a deep dialogue focusing on the latest discoveries, information, and insights on some of today's most provocative metaphysical topics. Here's your host, Sandie Sedgbeer.
Hello. Welcome to part 2 of this month's Conversations Beyond the Cutting Edge with transformational speaker, consciousness researcher, life coach and best-selling author, Cynthia Sue Larson, and sociologist, writer, researcher, and co-founder of World Shift International, Kingsley Dennis. And we're talking about the nature of reality, simulation theory, quantum jumps, the Mandela Effect, the reprogramming and reorganization of human life. Who's controlling how we think, and the burning questions: where is humanity heading? Have we been tricked into perceiving a false reality? And who are we really? If you missed part 1 of this important discussion, you can view it on my YouTube channel, Sandie Sedgbeer /streams. You can listen to it on Times Radio, and you can download it from Spotify and iTunes podcasts. And now, Cynthia Sue Larson, Kingsley Dennis, welcome back.
Thank you, Sandie. Such a joy to be with you guys.
Yeah, thank you, Sandie. Cynthia, good to be back speaking again.
So we finished, you were talking about Gnosticism, and I cannot remember 2 weeks ago what the other part of that was, but you said you wanted to tackle that in the second part of this show. So the floor is all yours, Kingsley.
Well, thank you, Sandie. Yes, I brought it up in the last few minutes of the program, and I thought it's too large a subject to kind of just mention it and not go further. So we were speaking about Philip K. Dick last time and his understanding of the nature of reality and how it's fluid and how you can change the variables. And Dick's cosmological framing of reality is, by and large, fundamentally Gnostic. And anyone who's aware of Dick's life and his Valis moment and everything that came from that would understand that he's been trying to grapple the nature of demiurgic control over reality. Now, Gnosticism generally is seen as a branch from heretic Christians coming out of Alexandria in the 2nd century AD, and there's various strands of this classical Gnosticism, which says that the one God of the Christians is actually in the Bible, and the one God that the Christians worship was not the actual source, origin, intelligence, but was an intervening intelligence. So you can call it a lesser God, which they call the demiurge. Now, Dick was coming off the back of that, and he took it forward. You could call it a kind of neo-Gnosticism, and actually a lot of these tropes, like the Matrix film and a lot of films similar to that, we can call neo-Gnostic because they're a modern variation on this fundamental theme. And the fundamental theme is that humanity does not have a direct relationship with the origin. Jacob Boehmer called it the Urgrund. We call it sometimes source or the absolute. But actually the gods that we know from our religious lineages often refer to an intervening God, which they call the demiurge. And this is an intelligence which is responsible for the creation of, let's say, our sector of reality or our part of the universe or this universal sector. And so it's not an ultimate absolute intelligence. It's flawed. And therefore its creation, i.e. this reality, is also flawed. And it's imperfect. And the Gnostics are trying to, because obviously gnosis pertains to the direct inner knowing. And gnosis means that they want to these practitioners of Gnosticism are trying to develop a direct connection between the incarnated individual and the absolute source or origin. But you have to get through this middle intelligence, this controlling intelligence called the demiurge. And to keep the control over this reality, the demiurge needs to largely subdue humanity's awareness and subdue their power. Because as we mentioned in the last program, humans are innately very powerful, but that knowledge has been subdued. Could be subdued by the demiurge and subdued by human agents on the planet to keep, humanity at this level of dumbed downness. And in Gnostic literature, the demiurge uses agents or associates to, let's say, inaugurate its mechanisms of control. In Gnostic literature, these were called the archons. Mm-hmm. And the Gnostics actually referred to them as cosmic parasites. So that's another kind of... So there's these agents of this demiurge. Now, Philip K. Dick was trying to understand the demiurge, and he came to the conclusion that he said the demiurge actually is a non-human intelligence. That's why it's very cold, very calculating. He actually called it the artifact. He seemed to think that it had a kind of mechanical intelligence, which is very interesting because neo-Gnosticism has a lot of these kind of AI, artificial intelligence tropes. But Dick was saying, well, actually, this kind of non-human mechanical intelligence, it's in error. It's not intelligent per se. It's calculating, but it's not intelligence the same way that we would think of intelligence, like intuitive, empathic. It's a kind of calculating mechanical intelligence. And actually, part of its structure is it may need to also know itself. The demiurge may need to know itself, which means, ironically, it may be relying on humanity to reboot the program or to reset the program or get rid of the flaws to help the demiurgic intelligence realize that everything is a bit of a mess. So that's why Dick's philosophy is slightly different. He wasn't blaming the demiurge as some all-powerful middle god. He was saying, well, actually, the artifact demiurge may need us to wake up to help get everything back into shape. So we need to, first we need to be aware that reality is not as we've been told, and there is an intervening intelligence kind of operating this reality. 2, we need to try to get into contact with that artifact or that reality, and we have to rise up to the challenge and intervene to try to change the variables of this flawed reality. So Dick was very interesting in that he took it a step forward, which is actually more in line with our understanding of the situation today, because now we have computational language vocabulary. We can talk about timeline switches, which is why we can talk about the Mandela Effect. I think we're at a point in our civilizational trajectory where we have all the tools we didn't have before to tackle the situation and deal with our evolutionary dilemma, so to speak.
That's really interesting. How does that stand with egregores, Cynthia? You mentioned those. I first came across those, or that word, in Hank Wesselman's final book. Before he passed, he was talking about egregores. And then, of course, we have the whole Wetiko thing that seems to be getting a lot of attention now, which is kind of like a mind virus. And it's an energy, but it's not necessarily an energy in the same way that we are an energy.
Yes. Well, I'll come back to that, but I just want to quickly touch on what Kingsley was talking about, because this is brilliant. Just acknowledging that there could be this kind of a mechanical artifact. And I think Philip K. Dick is definitely onto something. And it does seem indeed that we're now at a point where we've got the ability to talk about and start thinking about this. And what would it look like in terms of helping humanity to rise to the occasion of recognizing that we have similar abilities, and perhaps this artifact has a need to expand, sort of spiritually grow, and it's time for it to grow too. This doesn't need to be our primary concern, but I think it's important to recognize that and really spotlight that. Like, okay, this is important. Because one of the things that I do when I work with, I'm a spiritual life coach, and I do work with people to become more aware of how they may be influenced. This is coming back to your question, Sandie. About this whole thing about Wetico and the egregore, and what Kingsley talked about 2 weeks ago about evil, and taking a look at that. What is that, and what's it really doing? And if it does have a value, then obviously we're seeing the value when we get squeezed and we go through difficult times, such as I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, I went through that long COVID. And so most of us have been through something challenging in the last several years. Whatever the nature of our personal journey might be, we probably got challenged. We probably felt like we were getting squeezed. Maybe we felt like there was evil. We may have lost our faith in various organizations and maybe individuals as well. And along that path, we are getting the invitation, whether we know it or not, to rise up and face this Wetico, this sort of conglomerization of possibility of evil itself. What is that? What is this egregore that can speak through us and move through us? One of my favorite books to look at this is it's a strange book. It's written under a pseudonym, Barbara O'Brien. She wrote a book called Operators and Things. And she was obviously a trained observer before she went into schizophrenia. And then she came back out 6 months later. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is because she had firsthand experience with observing. For her, it was like these physical beings are talking. They're just as real as you or me. And so they're having a conversation and they're affecting change. But she could see these people called hook operators, which she said, those are us. Those are humans too. And things would be someone who's operated on by a hook operator. Hook operators are like egregores. And the idea of egregore is, like I said, it's very ancient. The Greeks knew about it. The idea is that an idea cannot be ours, but can be influencing us. And how would we know if such a thing is happening? How would we know if we're being operated on by one of these operators, these hook operators? The short answer, we can't know for sure. It's just like I used to work in information security with information technology for financial institutions, and there's no way to guarantee any system is secure. Similarly, there's no way to guarantee that none of us are being operated on by egregores or Wetico. So then what do we do if that's the case? And we might be infiltrated by one of these higher dimensional entities, basically. Especially given the fact, like Kingsley is talking about, what if we don't have that direct connection to source, or we can't count on it, and we're starting to have questions because of all things, our Bible is changing. That's a big Mandela effect for a lot of people. What animal lay down with the lamb? I'll ask you, Kingsley, in the Bible, some creature lay down with the lamb. Do you remember what that is?
Was it the lion? No?
Yeah, it's what I remember. Now, unfortunately, fortunately, whatever, it's always been the wolf. The wolf has always laid down with the lamb. So,
a lion in wolf's clothing, or a wolf in lion's clothing?
This is a Mandela effect, so it's one that we share. Also, I'm not going to go through all the Bible changes, but there have been lots of them, and people start wondering, what the heck? Our Bible is changing? Does that mean, how can we trust the Word of God? Mm-hmm. But if we understand the Word of God is embodied in the idea of Jesus Christ, in that Christ consciousness, and Philip K. Dick talked about that in his speech in Metz, France. So I'm just coming full circle back to this whole question, Wetico and egregore, what's going on? We can be influenced by what I would call higher dimensional causal agents, which are in need, in many cases, of growth and transformation, just as we are. And so that's, I think, the correct way to go into all of these engagements instead of... The reason I'm mentioning that is because humanity historically sometimes has fallen into a lower level of those are the bad guys, we're the good guys. And I think it's very important to recognize, what if we're all growing and changing together? And that's what I love about what you said, Kingsley.
There was a book I read by Andrew Collins and Greg Little, and I can't remember the title of the book, but Greg Little was talking about some form of energy that had been created at the same time we were created, if I remember this right. And this other energy, which some people, it can take forms. it does have a bit of the trickster kind of personality, if you can use that word. It's not a human. Some people who have met this kind of energy tend to think of it as an angel, or as the devil, depending on, how it shows up for them. But that its prime reason for being is to control the balance between the upper and the lower worlds. Now, that's a fascinating thing to think about. Some people could be thinking they're meeting an angel. Some people could think they're meeting the devil. Some could, that they're meeting Coyote. But it's all about, keeping the balance between us. And I don't know what they mean by the upper and the lower world specifically, but, it does make you think, well, we need to change our perceptions about things, because not everything is all bad or all good.
Interesting that you mentioned that. And I think, I'm not sure which book you mean, but I also know that Andrew Collins, in a later book, I think came out 1 or 2 years ago, he talks about these plasma beings, which sound a bit like the beings that you're talking about.
Yes.
And of course, when you talk about plasma beings, you're also talking about jinns. I mean, the Quran, the Quran speaks a lot about jinns, which people don't always pick up on, but they're very prevalent. And in the Quran, it says that Allah created man and jinn to worship Allah, which means that the jinns also were created to worship the divine, but some jinns don't. So they've taken it a choice of to go against the interplay, you can say, or the play of forces. Now, the Quran describes jinns as smokeless fire, which sounds a lot like plasma as well. And if anyone's interested in this subject of plasma, I would highly recommend reading Robert Temple's book, A New Science of Heaven. I think it's very, very important book on the idea of plasma intelligence, which could play into the demiurge, because there's a chapter on Gnosticism and the plasma clouds perhaps being plasma intelligence, demiurgic intelligence. So there's so many things in play here, but and I think if we look back at history, we can see that these forces and counter forces have always been recognized by most wisdom traditions. If you look at the Upanishads and the Vedas, they talk about the cosmic war in the heavens going on. In Persian cosmology and scripture, you have, of course, Ahura Mazda and Ahriman kind of struggling for contestation. Of course, we know we have the Christ and Satan, and we have all these kind of interplays. And of course, especially the Roman Catholic Church has been involved in the possession exorcist line for a long time. So they've recognized, there are these other forces. And I never took much notice of the exorcist side of Roman Catholic Church. But if anyone wants to be convinced, you just have to look at the Hostage to the Devil by Malachi Martin. You cannot come out of that book unswavered. And that is, first-hand experience of that. So these forces, there are unknown forces that have always been in interplay with this dimension of this reality. And I think, like I said, the wisdom traditions have always recognized that. The question is, what role do they play? And I think, we do have a kind of polarized reality, because otherwise we're not in a unitary reality. We're in a polarized reality. So there has to be this dynamism. And I often think of it is that friction is necessary. So, for example, if you get into a car and you want to drive, if there's no friction between the road and the wheel, you're not going to get very far, are you? A frictionless contact doesn't get you anywhere. So I think if we use that analogy, we can see that these polarized forces create a dynamism which is necessary to keep this dimension of this universe away from stagnation. Because the last thing you want is complete 100% equilibrium, because you're not going to move anywhere. Now, you may have that equilibrium in the greater reality, in the divine, and in the absolute, whatever you want to frame it. But in this reality, this construction, which I call the lesser reality, we need movement. if we're going to fix our errors of this Gnostic construction, as we mentioned, then we need to be pushed to see those errors and to create movement. So I see these counter evolutionary forces actually assisting evolution by the tug of war and the contestations. But the prime question is, or the issue is, not to get entangled in the negativity of these forces, because then you forfeit your evolutionary potential because you're giving away your energy to those forces. That's why I often refer to the Gospel of Philip. It's a Gnostic gospel from the Nag Hammadi codices, and I'm rephrasing it, but the Gospel of Philip said something like, you must recognize these disruptive forces to dispel them. If they're not recognized, they have power. Once they are recognized, they are dispelled. So I'm paraphrasing, but so it means that we need to recognize these forces in play, not to get brought down to a lower density of vibration, not to be negatively affected by them, but to use that constructively to transform the forces into a developmental impulse. And that's our play, and it's also our choice whether we align and get dragged down, or we can detach and transform these forces for our benefit. And I think we're seeing that somehow in play in the events across the physical world right now.
Cynthia, you mentioned earlier the golden era, I think. And listening to what we've been talking about now with the egregores and Chico and all of the jinns and all of these forces, and what Kingsley has just said, it's really what we need to be doing is really looking at our perceptions, because we can dismiss something as being absolutely evil, take a stand against it, etc. But it's much finer than that. And I think one of the hardest things to do is to change people's perceptions.
Yes, and I love this discussion about the Gnostics, and I'm so appreciative of these references that Kingsley pointed out. I think they're well worth people following up and researching that. I do some work, like I said earlier, with clients, and one of the things I'll do is work to clear these kind of negative entities. And it does have a tie-in with the Golden Age. And as Kingsley pointed out, it's important to recognize the presence of these kinds of very immaterial. You might not see them. You might feel or sense that there's a presence there. Sometimes it's unmistakable. I haven't read the book Kingsley mentioned about, hostage of the devil. Wow. Or yeah, that sounds serious, hardcore. I fortunately haven't gone fully into a life's work of exorcisms. That's not my profession, but I am capable of helping people, especially learned if they've got the innate ability to do this kind of clearing, that they can start doing so. And it's very important to first recognize that there's that presence. It's also, there are just three things required that I've noticed. The first is the thing that we were saying is so difficult for humanity, to have that direct line of connection to true source. So right there, that can be a showstopper for a lot of people because they hit the demiurge or they feel like they're not really connected. 2, you need to be able to discern the presence of such a thing. And 3, you simply need to be able to clear it. Those sound simple, and they are simple. Easy, no, not necessarily easy. But fortunately, as I would agree with the Gospel of Philip, that the recognition is the key. And if you can recognize, and like I said, you've got those other 2 gifts, you've got that direct line of connection. If you have that, then you can pretty much do the clearing. And I'm hoping, the reason I'm taking a moment and just explaining this is because I feel that it's necessary for humanity to give itself breathing space with a golden age, which means once you've exerted yourself, you've run your 50-yard dash, you don't want to run another 50-yard dash. So once humanity gets this traction and faces this friction and goes through this great squeeze and great challenge, then we deserve to receive maybe 1,000 years of peace. And if we know that we need it because of what we've just been through, then we have the right to request that and demand that and expect that. and then we can resume the dance with this energy, which may be there always to keep us in that balance that you mentioned, Sandie. So this is really important to recognize that we have a right to thousands of years of peace. Now, some people might want the peace early on, and I would say just accept whatever challenges you're given as graciously as possible. And I've been through it myself, so I know that that's difficult. I know I'm asking a big ask. It's a big ask. I know that. But I'm asking it anyway because I know that we're ready for this and that we are much greater than we seem, and that things can look one way and be transformed instantaneously into something much, much better. I would agree with Philip K. Dick when he said that there are much worse realities. And so I think all of this ties in together, and we can absolutely establish this golden age for ourselves by knowing we can look around and say, okay, I think humanity's earned this. We're doing pretty well. Is it perfect? Maybe not. But once we get through this, then let's get that peace time so we can integrate this and really instill a new level of what it is to be noble, as Kingsley said beautifully earlier. And
But
we do have sovereignty, we have nobility. Yeah.
Does that mean then that, we're just going to be on this continual seesaw, 1,000 years of peace, and then we're going to have the friction to start evolving again?
Okay, it can look that way.
Hard work.
Remember, that's the lesser reality, Sandie. This is not the real, because remember, there's that land of effects where it's the lesser reality. This is subjective experience. But then there's the causal level, which is where we can totally experience what it's like to be in the presence of true divine source, not the fake one, the real one. And that's what I remember so clearly. I know I've got a head start in this lifetime because somehow I came in with that knowing, which meant I was a flight risk. So I'm not afraid of death. Death is great. It's like, oh, I remember how good this can be. My job is how good can we make it in this reality right now? And I know we can do it. So I think any of us that have that knowledge, and the Gnostics are prime among these. These are the seekers who didn't give up on seeking that direct connection. These are our guides. And I'm so glad that Kingsley is studying this and sharing the neo-Gnostic approach and what we can learn from it.
So what would you say is the most important thing that we can be doing right now?
I'm going to go back to Wheeler and the participatory universe, and asking a question is the key to our sovereignty and our conscious agency, and it can pull us up by the bootstraps. So ask the questions. It doesn't have to be my favorite question. How good can it get? You can ask any question that you genuinely wish to live the answer to. And with that exciting feeling like, okay, this is going to happen. I'm asking a question I want to live the answer to. And I'm asking it with my head, my heart, my gut, all of me. And I am excited to see where is this going to go. That would be what I would recommend people do.
Kingsley?
Well, I would say internal balance. Now, we've been talking about everything's in flux and in play and these contesting forces, which is, true in this context. But these forces are not inside of us, and they shouldn't be inside of us. They're outside or in different, in this reality. So, and the more unstable a person is feeling inside, the more vulnerable or open they are to these influences coming in. So I would say one thing that as human beings, Cynthia said that we have the right for this golden future. I would also say we have the right to be protected, and because we can connect to a greater source, and we can ask for protection. So whilst we're in this maelstrom of forces, we can just say a few words and say, whatever you want to call the protector or the sacred or the origin, just call out and ask for protection, because if we ask for it, then we can be protected, because the world is trying to make us unaware of our capacities and unaware that we can ask for these things. And so that's why I see so much trauma in the world. You know that when a child reaches 12 years of age, they've witnessed 200,000 deaths. That's come from a French study. And so because they're witnessing 200,000 deaths through the media, not real death, but through television, video games, films, and everything, that desensitizes and does traumatize young children. So we need to be whole. And if we want to move forward, I would say that the more centered and grounded a person is, the more balanced they are in themselves, then that allows them to walk through the midst of what's going to happen through this evolutionary bottleneck, and they'll be protected. Just like, Mother Teresa walked through a leper colony and didn't pick up any disease because she was not resonating at the frequency of the disease. We should not be resonating at the frequency of the disorder and disruption that's operating around us. And that is also our protection. So I think that's also important to add, that whilst we're aware of the negativity, we need to keep a kind of integral balance in ourselves.
Well, we're going to take a short break now. You're listening to Conversations Beyond the Cutting Edge. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, and with me this month are transformational speaker, consciousness researcher, life coach, and best-selling author of Quantum Jumps, Reality Shifts, and the Mandela Effect, Cynthia Sue Larson, and sociologist, writer, author, researcher, co-founder of World Shift International, Kingsley Dennis, who's written and published over 24 books, including New Consciousness for a New World, The Struggle for Your Mind, Hijacking Reality, and The Inversion, How We've Been Tricked into Perceiving a False Reality. We'll be back with more from Cynthia Sue Larson and Kingsley Dennis after this break.
Hello, I'm Sandie Sedgbeer, host of On Time's flagship radio show, What Is Going On? And as an author, editor, and 13 times book judge who's read thousands of books and interviewed hundreds of authors, I'm constantly asked what's really worth reading and what's not. So I created the No BS Spiritual Book Club to help you save time and money by picking the brains of discerning names who have walked this path before you. There's no catch, no fees, and no BS. Just an ever-growing library of 10 best spiritual book lists from some of your favourite authors and teachers, plus free book excerpts, audios and video interviews with people like Don Miguel Ruiz Jr., David G., Lee Harris, Mark Nepo and more. From well-known classics to hidden gems you've never heard of, it's the only no BS guide to the best spiritual books to enlighten your journey of self-discovery. So why not join the club? Get inspired and save money at the nobsspiritualbookclub.com.
Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. Om Times Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Om Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Om Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Om Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Om Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Om Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Everything that we do, we can do in a contemplative manner. Through the art of contemplation, you can use the gene keys in a really powerful way. Gene keys is basically the code book of life. In the gene keys, the book is made up of these three levels: shadows, gifts, and siddhis. And the journey is through those three levels, kind of unpicking of the shadow states, the releasing of the gifts, and then the embodying of this higher consciousness called the siddhi. And the siddhis are very exalted words. And it's not like we kind of suddenly are all these exalted Christ-like beings, but we have flashes and illuminations along the journey. And the more we get stuck into the journey, the more illumination comes to us, because the more we're releasing the light from in these codes inside our DNA. So all those revelations are inside us. So the contemplative way is the inner way.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Welcome back. Cynthia Sue, Larson, Kingsley, Dennis. Let's talk about the nature of influences. I know we've touched on that in the first half of this episode, but there are many different influences currently working through people, both on an individual level and on a different kind of hierarchy of the cosmic level as well. You know, I think it's so hard for people to think that their thoughts are not their own, to think that, what they believe, what they know, they've been influenced to think. What advice would you give to people who are maybe recovering from all of the media has done an incredible job of, I think, hijacking people's minds over the past several years. What advice would you offer to people, and you, Cynthia, because you coach people too, to move beyond some of the influences that they've been subjected to and gain a little bit of insight?
Well, Sandie, from my side, I would say critical awareness. Because you say these influences are very subtle, and they don't have to be grand cosmic influences. I mean, we've been talking about these grand cosmic forces. But as you say, something as subtle as just media, or should I say propaganda, because most media is propaganda, really.
Yeah.
And media is a psyops, psychological operation. That's been very clear recently. Because, I mean, in the 1940s, Russia was doing psychic experiments and trying to influence their populace through television. And when America heard about that, they thought, well, we need to do the same. So obviously, all the psychic programs and remote viewing and Operation Mockingbird to infiltrate the universities, infiltrate academia, infiltrate all the media corporations and the journalists. That is known. I'm not, talking. I'm not inventing this. It is actually known, and you can look this up. So opinion, something as small as an opinion can be an influence. Of course, there are opinion makers, influencers out there in the world right now. So the question is, I think we need to do a two-step verification of our own thinking patterns. Is that if we think something, we should actually, what I say is that our genuine kind of intuitive thing has a certain taste, a certain texture, and inputted opinions or thoughts don't have that same texture. They seem somehow kind of just handed on a plate or something artificial. And these are what most opinions are. And you can meet a group of people, and 9 out of 10 share the same opinion. That's just been mimicked from the media, and the media mimics opinions to kind of influences. So if we think that thoughts are our property because they are a secondary phenomenon from our brain interaction, then we say, well, how can they put thoughts in our head? We feel invaded. We feel violated, if we think someone else is putting thoughts in our head. But because we live in a porous membrane of consciousness, the larger consciousness field is interpenetrating into our localized consciousness field. Once we accept that, which of course we mentioned earlier in our program, that if we can get away from the material paradigm being primary, we can understand that we are living in a porous consciousness field. So of course other thoughts can enter. The question is, we have to get recognition of our own thinking. Does that feel like something that's come from my process, or does it feel like it's something implanted, like a false seed or something? And we need to be aware of our thinking patterns, and always do a two-step verification before we speak. Because we speak our words too hastily. There's some things you can't take back, like an arrow which has left the bow or a stolen kiss. You can't take those back. And hasty words fall into that category. So I think we just need to just be more internally critically aware, not to berate ourselves, like saying, "Oh, silly me, I've been influenced by these other thoughts." We influence all the time. Everybody is. No one's immune. So let's not kind of whip ourselves into a frenzy, but just kind of be a bit more aware of our own operations, our own behavior. I would say that.
Discernment. Cynthia.
Yeah, discernment is so important. And I would add to this, first, I'd like to springboard off Kingsley's earlier recommendation to pay attention to being balanced, to being in that neutral state. And this applies to our emotionality. So we can discern emotional imbalance if we notice that we're ridiculously hyped up on anger or fear or grief, as if someone's been pushing our buttons and getting us to hate some individual or group of people. Just the fact that if we're feeling such strong energy of anger that it's gotten all the way to hate, it's good to take a moment and just observe that and step back. So what I'm suggesting is to employ a level of higher conscious agency. It's a dimensional approach that I want to give a shout out and reference the philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. He was one of the originators of calculus. We use his notation. I know Sir Isaac Newton gets credit, but calculus is the observation of a space so that you can integrate all over like a volume that has a strange topography to it and come up with the answer. So that mathematical approach is also observed when Leibniz talked about consciousness. And he said that there's a first order primary perception, such as I've got my hand out and a butterfly lands on a fingertip, but all I feel is a touch. I don't know. He didn't use the butterfly example. That's mine. But then I have a second order observation, like there's something touching my hand. So there was the shock. I might want to swat it, or I might be scared or angry, but I haven't really sorted out what's going on until I have the next order perception. This is a butterfly touching my finger. It's okay. So it's a really interesting process. We can gain that access to that information by observing our thoughts and feelings and recognizing that these thoughts and feelings, they're not me, but these are thoughts and feelings flowing through. So the more we do that, then the neurons that fire together wire together, and we start learning how to do this. A fast way, if you want to jumpstart this and get really good really fast, is practice Iliism. It's the art of journaling and talking about yourself in third person. Cynthia woke up today. She put her hand up in the air and a butterfly landed on it. But at first she was scared. She didn't know what had touched her because she wasn't looking at it. And then she had that next order of perception, and that was a butterfly, nothing to be worried about. So as we practice Iliism, talking about ourselves in third person, we start identifying with that higher order conscious agent that we are. We start recognizing there's some eternal, infinite consciousness sentience to myself that's observing my life. Like I'm going through a divorce and I'm upset with my ex or whatever. Some things are unfair, whatever. But I can observe it as Cynthia is going through this. And then suddenly the whole thing, my life can start looking like this amazing movie where I'm the hero of my life story. We can each become that, and it doesn't need to be as painful as it might sound. So this is my thoughts on all of that.
I love that approach. One of the things that I've noticed, and I tend not to, read the news, but I do see the headlines, going across my news feed. And, I try to stay distant. One of the things that I've noticed over the last several years, as a young journalist, I was trained to be very careful about the words I use, because one word, one adjective, can completely give a whole other, impression of whoever you're writing about. And I've seen that used to, really painful effect on some people. Just one word, and it kind of destroys their entire reputation because people understand what that word means. It's denigrating. We can't. At the moment, it doesn't seem as though we can change the media. Of course, we can change, what media we choose to pay attention to. But between the media and between technology, it looks to me as though the influence, especially on the younger people, is getting almost impossible, for parents and others to deal with and to protect the children from.
Well, yes, I mean, to a degree. I mean, we've mentioned already the influence of the negative influence of the technology, and there's been lots of already medical research into the effect of screens, long-term exposure to screens, and how they affect psychology and sleeping patterns. So that's going on, but at the same time, I think we have to understand that the human species is a resilient, adaptive species. And you see, we are the first generation to have one foot in the analog society and one foot in the digital society. So we are a kind of bridge generation, to use that term. We can still remember life without a mobile phone, where you had to make a meeting with your friend and wait half an hour if they were late. Now you just send a text. So, but I think the younger generations are coming in, and the first wave is finding have been still trying to resettle, I think, to recalibrate to some of the technologies and digital environment. But and there's some ill effects of that. But I think also the human species is very resilient, and when it recalibrates in a way to be able to adapt in a positive way to the environment. So I think that we're going to see the younger generations and the next generations actually being, let's say, more immune to some of the negative effects that have first impacted this exposure to this environment. I mean, I often talk about the world being terraformed. Terraformed, of course, is when you're reforming your environment to make it more amenable to the dominant species. And technology is coming in and it's kind of terraforming the environment to make it a more technologized world. And that is causing some difficulties because A, you've got some forces want to control that terraforming or to manage it. And B, a lot of people are adapting to it for the first time in their generation. But as that carries on, I think we're going to see a human species again being activated, because when you have a technological environment and you have a human species, technology can only go in one direction, and so far. And the human body is not going to grow new limbs and new appendages. We have a almost perfect biological body. So where can it go? And this is what we touched on before. The next evolution is going to be psychic, through subtle powers and subtle energies. So in a way, this environment, it may be another way to force these powers, these latent capacities to come out and unfold. So I think we're going to see change being spearheaded by this discomfort or this new environment we're witnessing.
Cynthia.
Yeah, the new generations are the future for all of us. And in the indigenous traditions, they talk about looking 7 generations forward and remembering 7 generations in the past. And I know that that's not currently much spoken about. Like I'm saying it and I'm thinking, that sounds so weird. It wasn't something I was taught when I went through school. But that is going to be, again, our way forward, just to recognize that there is a continuity to the sovereignty and the nobility of the intrinsic human that we are, and that it's so much more. I think the young people can see through the charade. They can see that some of the things that tripped us up, as Kingsley is referring to, with the technology and adapting to it, that we're stumbling and tripping. It's just sort of funny. The way already Generation Z looks at millennials trying to use the cell phone and bumbling along with it. And it's just quicker to hand the cell phone over to the Generation Z. Like, okay, you start the recording or do whatever. It's kind of comical. But there's something deeper there. There's a wisdom that those of us who came from the analog age through these, and even way before that. Because if you look at just 7 generations ago, that really goes far, far back. Most of us don't know our 7 generational going back ancestors unless we've done genealogical study and research. And even then, there may not be much to go on. We might look at their life stories and marvel, like I do, just going 4 generations back. I look at just the things that they went through, and this, back in the 1800s. You go back farther, and life was completely different than it is right now. And then looking forward. Yeah. So I think it's important for us to regain that continuity and not get fooled by the technology being supposedly our new God. I think the technology, to make that mistake, is to put AI, artificial intelligence, robots, and all of that on this level of false God. That is exactly the thing that it sounded like Philip K. Dick was warning us about. So let's not do that. Let's keep the sovereignty first.
One of the things that fascinates me, and I've got grandchildren of varying ages, is education. And I think about the future of education, because a lot of these children, they flatly refuse to participate in the education system as it stands at the moment, and they educate themselves, and many of them educate themselves through YouTube. They go and find what they want to learn about. I'm constantly astonished. My eldest grandson, who wouldn't do homework, refused to do what the teachers asked him to do, just, skated through school as a complete, reject in many respects. And he comes out with things, and I say, where did you learn that? And it's all on YouTube. So they are taking control of their own education and their own futures.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good thing, I think. I was involved as a teacher for some gifted children. And one of the things I loved about the program was a summer program. But the first step was to ask each and every student what were their goals for that particular class. And then it was our job as instructors to completely tailor the class for that particular student. And a lot of the teachers didn't like this because it seemed like, oh my gosh, this is so much more work. But I took it as a positive challenge. Like, hey, this is cool. I've got 20 students, 20 different ideas of what they want. This is really fun. But I think that is exactly what you're saying, Sandie. With students now, they can start choosing for themselves, where do they want to go? And these are the new gifted leaders of the world. They are guided by what truly interests them. Then they're truly passionate about this, and they're engaged. And I can't think of a better golden age than to have people studying things that they really want to learn.
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the burning questions at the beginning that I mentioned was, who are we really? What's your response to that?
We are intrinsically wise humans, as the name suggests, Homo sapiens. We have a divine true nature that's been concealed from us. The very fact that we can ask a question and nature can answer. This is a participatory cosmos, and we can be aware of that at a higher level than we've ever been aware before. So we are consciousness. We are infinite. We are eternal. We are also simultaneously these physical bodies. So it's a little bit of an interesting paradox, but we've been talking about that the whole time, these two levels. So we're all
Kingsley.
of that.
Well, simply I am. We are. And I think, as Cynthia said, it's important to realize that we are eternal spiritual beings, which means that there is no finite death. There is no end. We are in this transitory incarnation. It's been referred to in Gnosticism like a game, and we are players of it. And we have certain game rules, like we do in a schoolyard when we play in a game. But when we leave it, we return, or we go back to eternal being. We are spiritual beings having a physical incarnation. So ultimately, we should have no fear. And we should recognize that we are this beautiful, gracious, loving, infinite spiritual being. Right now, we're stuck in a certain kind of game, but we are eternal beings.
Absolutely. Cynthia, I've known you 25 years, and I remember when you first started Reality Shifters, and back then, if you'd had, could you have possibly imagined that 25 years later we would be doing what we're doing now? We would be in the place we are now.
With all of reality where it is now, no, I could not have predicted what's going on in the world right now. For you, I can easily see you rising into this beautiful level that you've attained. I'm so pleased to see that you are such a strong presence of communicating and bringing ideas out in the world. And for myself, this is what I would have dreamed of. So I'm living the dream.
So when you say how good can it get,
Yes,
this is the answer. What we're experiencing now is the answer to that question. If it was asked 25 years ago, how
yes,
good can it get? Yeah,
absolutely, yes.
Kingsley, could you have imagined 25 years ago that we would be where we are now, experiencing everything that we're experiencing?
Not at all. I'm surprised that I'm actually speaking out. I mean, I was always a very shy kid. I never thought that I'd be putting forward my ideas, and when I was a teenager, I thought I wanted to be a poet, and then I wanted maybe to be a novelist. But writing this serious stuff and trying to grapple with the world and to be able to be blessed by having avenues and platforms where people actually want to listen to what I want to say. Never in a million years I would thought I'd be the poet stuck in the corner being very quiet. But I guess life had a different plan for me, and I feel very blessed that I've got to where I am, and I've been able to participate with like-minded people, and it makes me realize that humanity, as Cynthia said, it has. If you look at the long view, which is what we need to appreciate. When we have the long view, we realize that we're on a very, very long journey, and these hiccups in the path can't hold humanity back. No.
But, what do you think, if we look at the biggest picture, why do we do all this? Why do we choose, as spiritual beings, if you like, why do we choose to have a human existence? What do we gain from that?
Bit of fun.
Yeah,
It's got to be. It's got to be, because we already know everything.
Yeah.
So, it's not to, increase our knowledge.
Well, I mean, as you know, in religions and God and the divine has said in different lineages that I created because I wanted to know myself.
Yeah.
And a hidden treasure to be found. So I think life is a bit like a treasure hunt. We go through different forms of life, whether it's in a physical incarnation or an astral realm. We go through like a treasure hunt to find all aspects of knowable existence. I mean, if we are an incarnate spirit, how do we know the taste of an apple, the taste of a kiss, the touch, the caress of a loved one? I mean, even these small things just give us so much to grow by. So I think we're on a treasure hunt to find all these hidden gems that we can experience and to benefit from them and to give something back into whatever form of life that we're passing through.
Cynthia, what would you say?
I think that's brilliant. It's like hide and seek, playing hide and seek with ourselves and with levels of ourselves, and discovering, just like we have our head and our heart and our gut. And most people aren't aware that we have all these personas within us, but we also have these higher levels of conscious agency as well. And so a lot of what we're trying to find it's in our subconscious, it's in our higher dimensional self, and it's there, but we're seeking ourselves. And it can be fun especially if you're on the how good can it get journey. And that's like a spice. I recommend add the how good can it get spice to everything you're cooking up. So whatever game you're playing, throw that one in there. If you need protection, then you'll have the protection. If you need to get unstuck, it'll help unstick you. If you need more friends, you'll find them. whatever you need, it'll be there.
You know, I once asked Bruce Lipton, you know, why do we keep coming back? And you know what his answer was? Chocolate. Chocolate.
But
Good one.
was it dark chocolate?
Yes, must be.
He didn't
Absolutely.
specify. He didn't specify. Just chocolate. You know,
Yeah.
probably all of it. Yeah.
And I would like to add also that in this game, the bullies are the loneliest people.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. And they're the saddest people because they're the most afraid.
Yeah.
And I think we have to think about that when we judge, you know, things that are happening in the world, that these people are afraid.
And that's part of that drama triangle, those three key emotions I was referencing briefly. The anger, that would be the bully or the persecutor. The fear would be the rescuer. And the sadness and the grief is the victim. But it's just a victim triangle. It's not real. I know it looks real. I know people can say, oh, Cynthia, it's real. We've got trauma here. Sure you do. But that's at the effect level, that lower reality, the lesser reality, the physical reality. When you get to the causal level, and you do that Iliism exercise, recognize who you really are, then you start noticing you are not that anger and that hatred of whoever you think you hate, which it instigates the whole bully cycle. And so that is an unhappy merry-go-round. The unmerry merry-go-round of starts as a victim, usually moves into a rescuer, then ultimately ends up as the persecutor, the bully. But it doesn't have to do that. You don't have to go there. You can exit the whole drama triangle, and it's perfectly, it's good to do so. We're meant to do so. That's part of our journey, you know, on this game, to see through it.
Yeah, and remember who we are. Cynthia Sue, Larson, Kingsley Dennis, thank you both so much for joining me in this important discussion.
Thank you, Sandie. It's been a pleasure, and thank you, Cynthia.
And thank you, Kingsley. Thank you, Sandie.
Cynthia Sue Larson's latest book, The Mandela Effect and Its Society, Awakening from Me to We, is available in paperback from online bookstores and at her website, realityshifters.com, where you can also find her other books, articles, events, and sign up for her Reality Shifters newsletter. And likewise, Kingsley Dennis's latest book, The Inversion, How We've Been Tricked into Perceiving a False Reality, is also available at online retailers and directly from Kingsley's website at kingsleydennis.com, where you can explore his other books, his articles, videos, and podcasts. I'm Sandie Sedgbeer. I'll be back next month on December the 3rd with the first part of another conversation beyond the cutting edge with founder and principal of Australian Close Encounters Resource Network and author of The New Human Awakening to Our Cosmic Heritage, Mary Rodwell, and integration specialist, CEO and founder of Blue Star Education and Research, and author of Awesomeism, A New Way to Understand the Diagnosis of Autism, Susie Miller. No prizes for guessing where that conversation will be taking us. I hope you'll join me then.